beginning deep throttle.
Under the power of 5.1 million pounds of thrust, Falcon Heavy is headed to space.
Pico.
Booster separation confirmed.
Successful separation if you can hear me over the cheering. Side boosters now beginning a flip to begin returning back to Cape Canaveral.
Miko.
Main engine cut off, center core shut
Stage
down.
separation confirmed.
Here comes the fairing separation, and there it goes.
Today, we'll be attempting to recover all 3 of the first stage cores, and all 3 boosters are currently on their way heading home. In just a few minutes, the side boosters will execute an entry burn, followed by a landing burn, and the center core will do much the same a few minutes later.
Coming up in about 5 seconds here, the side boosters landing burn will begin as well.
Trillions could flow through cryptos like Stellar XLM, and Zion coins could benefit. Welcome back to Banking on Bitcoin Revisited Part 4. And in this series, we're going to be looking at, again, what's happening with US regulation, what's happening with UK regulation. Is there a deal to be done? Has Ripple settled the lawsuit with the SEC? Are there any other cryptos that have regulatory clarity with the SEC? It is the 12th of June 2023, and we are still going through this lawsuit with Ripple, and really it's just affecting all other cryptos. At present, the SEC has declared all out war on cryptos. I think it's clear they're including Bitcoin, or rather one person. Gary Gensler is including Bitcoin. He's made a statement that cements that confirms that, including Ethereum. He couldn't answer Congress, and we can only assume that that is what he meant. He is there to protect the incumbent, and that is what he's going to do. This issue with interoperability into the current financial system with cryptos ensues, and Gary Gensler is making it harder and harder for the US to come up to standard, to come into standard with new banking regulations, with new banking standards. Gary is putting the clampers on.
We already have digital currency. It's called the US dollar, it's called the euro, it's called the yen. They're all digital right now. Look, we don't need more digital currency. We already have digital currency. It's called the US dollar, it's called the euro, it's called the yen. They're all digital right now. Look, we don't need more digital currency. We already have digital currency. It's called the US dollar, it's called the euro, it's called the yen. They're all digital right now.
And unfortunately, he's decided to bring lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit to crypto exchanges, clamping down on how individuals can obtain their cryptos. He's decided to take Coinbase to court. He's decided to take Binance to court, two of the biggest crypto exchanges in the world. And now Gary is trying to stop individuals buying cryptos, and Congress recognizes this. Let's find out just what's happening.
Hey, real quick, last question. I think it might have came up. You were Hillary Clinton's CFO in the campaign, right?
It's part of my history.
Were you? Yes or no?
In 2016.
Did you facilitate the payment for the Steele dossier since you were CFO of the Hillary Clinton campaign?
Sir.
Yes or no?
Sir.
Yes or no?
That was not.
You're under oath, Chairman Gensler. Yes or no?
I know. It was not something I was aware of.
I yield back the rest of my time. Thank you. Hey, real quick, last question. I think it might have came up. You were Hillary Clinton's CFO in the campaign, right?
It's part of my history.
Were you?
Existing regulatory framework and are specifically to the digital asset industry so the crypto market can come into compliance.
It's our rule books that are on the books for years, so we have not finalized any new rule specifically with regard to crypto. We've proposed some things in best execution. We've also...
Sir, reclaiming my time, the answer is 0. And how many enforcement actions has the SEC levied against digital asset companies during your tenure, sir?
I think it's probably 40 or 50.
The answer, sir, is about 55. My understanding is that the biggest crypto failure in history is probably FTX at $9 billion. Were you the chairman of the SEC when FTX collapsed?
Yes.
And how many times did you meet with FTX prior to their collapse?
I think my public record shows 2.
You met it with FTX at least twice. And arguably, the second biggest crypto failure in history was Terra Luna. Who was the chairman of the SEC when Terra Luna collapsed, sir?
We had brought...
You were, sir. Reclaiming my time, you were. There are 5 members on the commission. Do you believe your speeches and interviews are to serve as the official position of the SEC?
I can only speak for myself when I'm speaking.
Again, sir, in a statement on the SEC website, you are quoted saying, the Kraken staking as a service enforcement action should make clear to the marketplace that staking as a service providers must register. But again, you haven't provided any rules for how that can be done. I must remind you, your public statements are not regulations. It's not responsible to expect the American people to assume your statements are a substitute for rules. Do you agree with this statement regarding the digital asset industry? The SEC needs additional congressional authorities to prevent transactions, products, and platforms from falling between the regulatory cracks.
I think that it's a largely non-compliant field. And
sir, again, I asked you to comply with my questions, and I'm asking you if you agree with that quote. And I'm going to tell you, I'm quoting you from an August 3rd, 2021 article where you, and I believe you told Congressman Hill earlier that you need congressional authority to regulate stablecoins, and stablecoins happen to be a significant percentage of the crypto market. So the question is, when were you telling the truth? To Mr. Hill or to me? You've got to start answering these questions in a more transparent manner, sir. Does it concern you, by the way, that your approach to the digital asset industry is actually driving this industry out of the United States?
Trying to drive it to compliance, and if they're not complying with the laws, then they shouldn't be offering their products.
Reclaiming my time. Madam Chair, I would like to enter into the record this Wall Street Journal article from April 14th, 2023, detailing China's ploy to open its banking system to crypto firms in an effort to seize an opportunity created by our hostile regulatory environment, which, Mr. Chair, you're a big part of.
Without objection.
Chair Gensler, FTX was domiciled abroad and so is Binance, yet American consumers still had access to both. You can't really think that pushing this industry abroad is going to protect American consumers when it hasn't several times in the past on your watch. You say the crypto market is rife with non-compliance. However, existing SEC rules make no sense for blockchain-based companies, and following them would actually kill these businesses. Your regulatory style lacks flexibility and nuance, and as a result, you've been an incompetent cop on the beat, doing nothing to protect everyday Americans and pushing American firms into the hands of the CCP. Your intention to work against SEC mission and put American investors in harm's way has been made very apparent, sir. It's been a year and a half since you've appeared before this committee. You need to answer to Congress about the issues that you've had with the SEC staff union, the work environment you've cultivated at the SEC that's led to hemorrhaging of senior staff, the intellectual inconsistency of your regulatory treatment towards Bitcoin spot ETFs, and your politicization of capital formation opportunities through your treatment of certain SPACs. And that's just to name a few. Thank you. I yield.
Gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Gottheimer, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and Ranking Member Waters. Mr. Chancellor, thank you for being here.
Responsible or implicated in the production of that document regarding the charges to SBF?
No, let me say two things. One, it's really important to protect investigative files because there are things in investigative files that are private, and we put out then in a charging document for a court to review and the public to review the important information about those charges. But an investigative file is important to keep confidential. Number two, the Justice Department conducts parallel investigations, and that's a separate matter as to whatever they do.
So a memo was requested. There should be an internal document from your agency. You and your agency report to this committee, so you should be able to produce that document.
Again, sir, I have deep belief in and respect for congressional oversight, but we're working with the committee staff here, we're working with the members that you met to try to address their issues. We've met, the staffs have met, have continued to brief as to how we deliberate and how we approach enforcement matters. But it's also a really important thing
I'll
that we
reclaim my
protect
time.
Investigative files.
You know, we have a Homeland Security agency that gets secret documents to the committee. They can be reviewed in the SCIF. There can be a process here by which you oblige this committee and produce the documents that have been requested. It's that simple. If I wanted to hear preaching, I'd go to church. You were asked a question. A document was requested. You have an obligation to produce it. Now, if we need to take extraordinary measures to protect the information within that document, it can be done so. But please spare me the preaching. Is it fair to assume that you were about to say that the Department of Justice is
of failures to protect investors and abuses of power make it clear that we need to restructure the Securities and Exchange Commission? The failures are many, but let me cite some of the abuses. You average more than 2 rules proposals a month. You provide inappropriately short comment periods. You have unworkable and unlawful ESG disclosure mandates on the market. You have essentially a Hotel California rule for crypto where you can check in anytime you like, but you can never leave. You have endless discovery with no resolution and no clarity for the captives in the market. You have unworkable proposals for overhauling equity market structure, a de facto ban on crypto through proposed custody rule. You have high staff turnover, unhappy people leaving your office, and unhappy companies and capital leaving our country. To correct a long series of abuses, I'm introducing legislation that removes the chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission and replaces the role with an executive director that reports to the board where all authority would reside. Former chairs of the SEC will be ineligible under my proposed bill. And this isn't just my take. It resonates across the political spectrum. The American people want democratic access to capital, retail investor participation. You can't just exclude retail investors from markets and claim it's for their own good. Our markets need to function and flourish, and I yield back. Of failures to protect investors.
We already have digital currency. It's called the US dollar, it's called the euro, it's called the yen. They're all digital right now.
Now this is Gary after his grilling from Congress. Really, there is no end to this person's disdain for cryptos, and it's almost as if Gary is handing the reserve currency over to the BRICS nation.
Oh yes guys, we're back. Welcome to another episode of Good Morning Crypto, and here on I Won't Take. Today we'll be speaking about massive news, guys, because right now we do have confirmation that Russia's biggest bank will allow crypto trading. This is in spite of what's happening in the US. As you know, US is so hostile to crypto. US is really suing their golden goose, which is Coinbase. They're also scaring away everyone from the US by going after Binance and other industry players. At the same time, we're seeing Russia go in the other direction. The largest banking institution in Russia by asset value, Sberbank, will reportedly enable private investors to buy and sell digital currencies in the following weeks. And why are they doing this? Is Russia really pro-crypto? They love crypto. At the end of the day, everyone is acting in their own interest.
And it's clear what's happening. Russia is becoming extremely crypto friendly. With Gary stifling innovation, trying to shut down exchanges, doing his best to snuff crypto out in the United States. You know, we know that this report from the White House speaks of CBDCs and that this should really be the only digital currency and no other. And really, I think Gary is beating to this drum and the rest of the world isn't. I think we need to look at one of my videos and my thoughts about the white paper, the White House crypto frameworks, just briefly.
Biden-Harris's administration and independent regulators have worked to protect consumers and ensure fair play in digital assets market by issuing guidance, increasing enforcement resources, and aggressively pursuing fraudulent actors. As outlined in the reports released today, the administration plans to take the following additional steps. The reports encourage regulators like the Securities and Exchange Commission and the CFTC, consistent with their mandates, to aggressively pursue investigations and enforcement actions against unlawful practices in the digital asset space. Now, it's almost as if this White House white paper, this document, is encouraging the SEC to aggressively pursue blockchains, but it states unlawful practices. And I'm at loggerheads here, because if the frameworks aren't built correctly, how does the SEC pursue unlawful practices in the digital asset space? You know, how do they do that? And really, this is almost like a green light for the SEC to do that. If they deem somebody, it's almost like they're saying green card to investigate them and take them to court, and you might win. That's almost, you're kind of, with this white paper, that's what I get from that. And it almost makes sense to me that that's what they're happy with. But it doesn't matter. If a project survives, then yeah, maybe we can work with you. If you don't, bye. Because they got their gunslingers, right? Central bank digital currencies, right? Because this is what I think it's all about. I think they want the full autonomous control. On a US CBDC digital form of the US dollar has potential to offer significant benefits. It could enable a payment system that is more efficient, provides foundation for further technological innovation, facilitates faster cross-border transactions, and is environmentally sustainable. It could promote financial inclusion and equity by enabling access for a broad set of consumers. In addition, it could foster economic growth and stability, protect against cyber and operational risk, safeguard the privacy of sensitive data, and minimize risk of illicit financial transactions. A potential US CBDC could also help preserve US global financial leadership and support the effectiveness of sanctions, but a CBDC could also have unintended consequences, including runs on CBDCs in times of stress. Recognizing the responsibility of the US CBDC, the administration has developed policies objects for a US CBD system, which reflects on the federal government's priorities for a potential US CBDC. These objectives flash out the global outline for a CBDC in the EOA US CBD system, if implemented, should protect consumers, promote economic growth, improve payment systems, provide interoperability with other platforms, advance financial inclusion, protect national security, respect human rights, and align with democratic values. But further research and develop on the technology would support US CBDCs is needed. The administration encourages the Federal Reserve to continue its ongoing CBD research, experimentations, and evaluations to support the Federal Reserve efforts and to advance other work on potential US CBDC. Treasury will lead an integrity work group to consider the potential implications of the US CBDC leverage cross-government technological experiment and share information within partners. The leadership of the Federal Reserve and National Economic Council and National Security Council, the Office of Science and Technology Policies, and the Treasury Department will meet regularly to discuss working groups' progress and share updates on CBDC and other payment initiatives, other payment innovations. Sorry, not initiatives. Right, not initiatives. Initiatives. So there you go. My take is, from what I'm getting with their gunslingers, the SEC in itself, the White House wants the whole thing. They don't want other players involved. They're continuing their research. Play along, but don't blame us if our dogs come to get you and shut you down. That's my take on this.
So, a big question is other cryptocurrencies, have they been declared not a security? Have they been taken to court by the SEC and declared not a security? Well, we know EOS was taken to court for an ICO. They did initial coin offering, raising 4.1 billion. We know Block One, Dan Lima, responsible for the ICO, responsible for EOS, obviously no longer with EOS, had taken the money and gone, but rose a $4.1 billion ICO funding for Block One. Again, this is a proof of stake cryptocurrency. That is a consensus mechanism, and this is the problem with that type of consensus mechanism, I think. But I wonder if ChatGPT could give us a little bit more information about that. Over to you, ChatGPT.
The question of whether EOS is a security in the US is a matter of some debate and uncertainty. The US SEC has not officially declared whether or not EOS is a security, although they did file a lawsuit against EOS's parent company Block 1 for conducting an unregistered ICO. The SEC has previously stated that whether a token is a security depends on the specific facts and circumstances of the offering, and they have provided some guidance on how they make this determination. Factors that may be considered include how the token is marketed, how it is sold, whether it provides owners with ownership rights or shares in a common enterprise, and whether the token's value is expected to rise based on the efforts of others. Given that the SEC has not declared EOS to be a security, it's difficult to say definitively whether or not it is one. However, the fact that they brought a lawsuit against Block 1 and settled for $24 million suggests that they believed there were some potential securities law violations related to the EOS ICO. This case highlights the importance of complying with securities laws and regulations when launching any sort of token offering or fundraising campaign.
Okay, so it seems fairly clear that EOS hasn't really got clearance from the SEC to say that it's not security. But what about Ethereum? Didn't Joseph Lubin say that Ethereum is not a security under Bill Hinman? Is that right? So I know there's some controversy there, but yeah, let's look into it. Let's just see what's unveiling right now today. DAI, please, let everybody know.
Now, Ashley Prosper, after going looking at all the Hinman email stuff, Ashley Prosper has been all over it. Good stuff. Just in case you think the unsealed documents are a nothing burger: 1. ETH free pass confirmed. 2. Regulatory capture confirmed. 3. Hinman ethics breach confirmed. 4. Market confusion confirmed. 5. SEC overreach with Howey analysis confirmed. 6. Ripple's fair notice defense affirmed. If that's a nothing burger, I'll take 100 more, please. Me too. Now look at this right here. Vitalik Buterin didn't just try to get the Ethereum free pass, which I can understand. No, he simultaneously tried to help the SEC shut the door on every crypto project that wasn't operating on the Ethereum network. He tried to create a monopoly that JP Morgan, Consensus, the EEA, Jay Clayton, Simpson Thatcher, Bill Hinman, A16Z, and the Ethereum whales would benefit from. They all acted unethically, and some even acted illegally. It's no wonder the DOJ tried to get Stephen Nerioff to give up the goods on Joseph Lubin. And who's to say he didn't? The case against Stephen was mysteriously dropped after he had already been indicted. If I were Lubin or Vitalik, I'd be running back to Sweden. Oh wait, that's right, they can't because they screwed over 35 employees by secretly selling core parts of Ethereum business to JP Morgan and are now being sued in Swiss court. Or at least Joseph is. Everywhere they go, everything they touch turns to S word, as my 10-year-old would say. This is an interesting write-up. Then there's this. ETH clearly began as a securities offering. Here, Bill Hinman says it. Subject: first stab at the digital asset security morphing issue from Bill Hinman. And it says, application to Ether clearly began as a securities offering. Right there. Just right out. Says it. No need to see anything else. And then, once again, Ashley Prosper. Jay Clayton wasn't interested in giving Ripple clarity. This it talks about the meeting with Brad Garlinghouse and David Schwartz and those guys. And right here, I think we've shown this in the past. Towards the end of the meeting, Garlinghouse briefly noted that Ripple was in purgatory due to uncertainty as to whether XRP, the cryptocurrency which Ripple associated, is or is not a security. In response, Chairman Clayton immediately stated that the meeting was not the proper forum for discussion about that topic. But it was a proper forum for Bill Hinman to call Vitalik Buterin to get Vitalik Buterin's explanation of how the Ethereum Foundation works, so that they could, because it was proper to talk about Ethereum in those meetings, just not XRP. And look, another point I want to make sure everybody gets: Bill Hinman was the bad guy of yesterday. And a lot of people were saying, okay, well, most of these people at the SEC seem to be just trying to do their jobs. And yes, okay. But Jay Clayton is the other guy. Jay Clayton wasn't in a lot of that stuff, but I believe Jay Clayton intentionally left himself out of a lot of that stuff so that he could have plausible deniability maybe. But Jay Clayton was involved. We have enough things here that point to Jay Clayton and Bill Hinman work. Then they also had a hearing with Patrick McHenry and those guys on digital assets. Listen to this portion right here.
Before we get to the substantive question of what to do with crypto, we as a country have to answer a more fundamental question. Who among us should get to decide the future of emerging technologies like crypto and blockchain? Should it be Chair Gary Gensler, an unelected bureaucrat who answers only to himself? Or should it be the United States Congress, whose members are elected by and therefore accountable to the people? And so, Mr. Allaire, do you believe, as I do, that an act of Congress would be the most democratic means by which to decide the future of digital assets?
Thank you for the question, Congressman Torres. I do agree, and in fact, the Presidential Working Group specifically asked Congress to act urgently on this matter over a year and a half ago. And so I believe it's critical that Congress does take full control here.
Okay, and then I have several clips. Watch this one.
Mr. Garrison, in 2021, SEC Chair Gensler said regarding the regulation of digital assets, quote, "There are some gaps in this space. We need additional congressional authorities to prevent transactions, products, and platforms from falling between regulatory cracks," close quote. He now says the securities laws are clear, that he doesn't need additional authority from Congress. Mr. Garrison, do you agree with Chair Gensler version 1, who we might call Dr. Jekyll, that he needs more authority from Congress to regulate crypto? Or do you agree with Chair Gensler version 2, Mr. Hyde, that the federal security laws are 100% clear and no relief is necessary to regulate digital asset securities and crypto platforms seeking to support them?
I'm not sure that I agree with either version. I believe the SEC has authority to regulate digital assets that are sold pursuant to investment contracts in a clearer way than they have. But I do also disagree that the securities law's application to the sale of digital assets is certainly not clear.
And that guy's Coy Garrison. He was senior advisor to Bill Hinman right before the Ethereum free pass speech. Then we've got this Binance hearing, SEC versus Binance hearing. Judge does not enter SEC's request to freeze the assets and encourages them to try and come to an agreed compromise.
That's great. Thanks for that, digital asset investor. So really, as a result of all of that, Ripple were able to release the Hinman emails, thousands of pages to mull over, and really the XRP army have done an outstanding job in uncovering these, I want to say, fraudulent actions from the SEC. It's not the first time that they've, been targeted over fraud and unethical behavior. It's just crazy that it's still happening today, right now, and they believe they can get away with it. And we really have to thank the XRP sleuths for uncovering this corruption, what I like to call corruption. That's the case for the courts to decide. In any case, let's see what Ripple's released in terms of their video.
On June 14th, 2018, then SEC Director of Corporation Finance William Hinman gave a high-profile speech where he declared that a token is not a security when it becomes, quote, sufficiently decentralized. But internal emails and documents show that senior SEC officials repeatedly warned Hinman that his speech wasn't true to the law and would greatly confuse the markets even more than they already were. Now, after more than 2 years and 7 court orders, we can finally share some of what we found in the Hinman speech documents. The SEC head of trading and markets warned Hinman that he was making up factors that, quote, go beyond the typical Howey analysis, as in not in the law, and that the speech could lead to not just confusion, but greater confusion on what is a security. Hinman ignored it.
If the network on which the token or coin
is the function is sufficiently decentralized, and the purchasers no longer have a reasonable expectation that a person or a group is going to carry out essential managerial or entrepreneurial efforts, those assets might not represent an investment contract.
The same official told Hinman he should tie his speech, quote, more closely and explicitly to the Howey analysis. Hinman not only ignored him, but deliberately created factors beyond those identified by the Supreme Court in the Howey case.
I wanted to just note a few things. This list is not meant to be exhaustive, but these are things that we look at.
The SEC's own general counsel warned specifically that it's legally irrelevant if someone retains a stake in a token and is motivated to take action to increase its value, and that Hinman should delete it from the speech. Once again, Hinman ignored them and said without any legal support that it was important to ask.
Has that person or group retained a stake or other interest in the digital asset such that it would be motivated to expend efforts to cause an increase in the value of the digital asset?
Both Trading and Markets and the General Counsel also disagreed with Hinman's belief that if a network was sufficiently decentralized, information asymmetries would no longer exist, noting that a network creator would likely have more information than a retail holder, using Vitalik Buterin as an example. They warned Hinman that by creating this, quote, other category and focusing on information asymmetries, he was exposing a regulatory gap that the SEC may not have the jurisdiction to fill. Again, Hinman ignored them.
As the network becomes more truly decentralized, the ability even to identify a promoter or to make the requisite, and someone that could actually make the requisite disclosures becomes in many cases difficult or and perhaps much less meaningful.
On June 4th, Hinman wrote that he didn't see a, quote, need to regulate Ether as a security, and set up a call with Ethereum's co-founder Vitalik Buterin later that week to, quote, confirm our understanding. On June 11th, the SEC's own general counsel advised against including any direct statement about Ether in the speech because it would be difficult for the SEC to, quote, take a different position on Ether in the future. The next day, Trading and Markets wrote that the statements about Ether were, quote, likely to create more confusion. Hinman ignored all of them and decided to make headlines, picking winners and losers instead.
Moreover, putting aside the fundraising that accompanied the creation of Ether, based on my understanding of the present state of Ether, the Ethereum network, its decentralized structure, we believe current offers and sales of Ether are not securities transactions.
The emails show that Hinman knew he wasn't following the law. He knew he was making things up. And he knew that his speech would result in greater confusion in an already confused market. But Hinman went ahead with the speech anyway. And the SEC, despite knowing all this, touted the speech repeatedly. The SEC chairman himself pointed market participants to the speech.
Bill Hinman recently outlined the approach we take to evaluate whether a digital asset is a security, and I encourage you to take a look at Bill's speech, which is available on our website.
The SEC knew the speech didn't follow the law. The SEC knew the speech would create greater confusion. And the SEC knew Hinman was making things up. So why is the Hinman speech still on the SEC's website? Why was it ever allowed to be given at all? And why has the SEC pushed a policy of regulation by enforcement, falsely insisting the rules are clear?
That's great. Well, we know why the SEC is taking this stance. Again, all we've got to do is look at the White House crypto framework. That kind of says it all from a previous video. But, you know, the parallels between now and back in 2014 with this hearing for this New York Bitcoin license crypto regulation, we need to look back at that briefly and see if there are any parallels here with government trying to clamp down on crypto and blaming it for essentially, you know, fraud, corruption, money laundering, crazy. You know, we have the technology to, you know, stop this from happening. And really, the onus is on the banks. Cryptos is a commodity. Okay, you know, there's no money laundering with commodities. It's, you know, currencies that essentially need to be regulated. Okay, if we want to regulate cryptocurrencies, then come up with the frameworks through Congress, not through the Securities Exchange Commission. It doesn't work like that. You need the CFTC and Securities Exchange Commission and Congress involved in it, elected by the people, so that we don't get this sort of corruption. In any case, banking on Bitcoin.
I'm 24 years old, arrested today and charged with engaging in money laundering. Shrem enabled people to transfer money from Bitcoin to cash via his company called BitInstant. Now, the other point that the DEA is making is that Shrem bought drugs online at Silk Road and that he knew Silk Road was a trafficking website.
And we know the Winklevoss twins, who obviously were featured in the movie about Facebook, they're actually investors in Shrem's company.
Yeah, a lot of people are very excited by this idea. They like the idea that you can have a currency that is not tied to any kind of central bank. But at the same time, think about it. If you're in the federal government, you don't like the idea that people could effectively use another form of cash to buy things that they shouldn't be buying online.
Over the last 6 months, our agency has been conducting an extensive inquiry into virtual currency. The information we're going to gather in this fact-finding effort will allow us to put forward, during the course of 2014, a proposed regulatory framework for virtual currency firms operating in New York. Yesterday, we had serious criminal conduct come to light involving virtual currency as a vehicle for money laundering, drug trafficking, and other major felonies. Right now, the regulation of virtual currency industry is still akin to a virtual Wild West.
I think people who imagine a very powerful utility like Bitcoin that would somehow escape regulation entirely are either naive or extreme optimists.
Bitcoin is a battle of ideas, and it forces the issue of whether people should be as free in their handling of money as they are in their handling of speech or religion or relationships with each other.
We believe that putting in place appropriate regulatory safeguards for virtual currencies will ultimately be beneficial to the long-term strength of the industry itself.
Lawsky was essentially given the opportunity to write the rules for this whole new industry from scratch.
The first question is the obvious one that's on everyone's mind. It was sort of unexpected yesterday, but with the arrests we saw, obviously that's put a bit of a cloud hanging over the industry right now. And so how do each of you react to what we saw yesterday, what it means for Bitcoin, virtual currency, and its future?
I think it further supports that bad guys are going to do bad things, and they're going to use whatever technology is available to them. But I view it as, if the allegations are true and they're convicted, the system works.
Something like that happen again, and it would have been a lot harder for 9/11 to ever have occurred had we had the protections in place that would prevent the movement of massive amounts of money around the globe by people who would want to kill everybody in this room. So I think the key is to not create useless regulation, but I think the motives behind a lot of those rules are to ensure we don't miss something again.
Since 2001, there's this absurd obsession with terrorism. So anytime a regulator gets up and says, well, Bitcoin can be used for terrorism, well, of course it can. So can anything. So can cell phones, and so can the internet, and so can a car. It doesn't mean that we should, stifle the growth of those industries just because bad people can use it. There's a whole bunch of money missing, and no one knows if they just lost it, if it was stolen from them, if they embezzled it, or what. But the important lesson from Gox isn't that Bitcoin doesn't work. The important lesson from Gox is that you don't leave your money with a trusted third party, because you can't always trust them. You can only trust them until you can't. This was also a lesson that people were supposed to learn during the financial crisis, but they don't seem to have learned it yet.
Well, back in 2019, we had COVID that just started, and in 2020 there was a COVID relief. Trillions of dollars were printed by the government. This spurred on the new bull run for cryptocurrencies, where Bitcoin found a new all-time high of $68,000. Other cryptocurrencies didn't experience so much of an all-time high because they were under the cost of the SEC the SEC had taken Ripple to court. They had various other court cases with Library. They were clamping down through Gary Gensler's regime. Then we had the crash of Celsius, Luna, which is now Luna Classic, FTX, Sam Bankman-Fried. All of this started to happen. You had Elon Musk that hosted the Saturday Night Live where they tried to pump the price of Bitcoin but failed, and then the bear market had started. We are now, to date, still going through this bear market. We still don't have regulatory clarity, and we still don't have a resolution with the Ripple court case. However, we need to take lessons from this. What are the lessons? Well, just like Mt. Gox and Luna and Celsius, you know, not your keys, not your crypto. Just because you have a trusted, or you think you could trust something that looks like an authority figure, including the government, do not trust. Not your keys, not your crypto. That's probably the biggest lesson that you could learn today. And thank you for watching this series of Banking on Bitcoin Revisited. I'm Nathan, aka Nathan of Zion. Have a great day. Take care now.